One game in particular is blowing up at the moment, and that is Arma Reforger. I cannot believe it, because I remember when this game came out, and it was like, yeah, this is cool. This is a tech demo for Arma 4, but it's, got a lot of issues. And now, 1 million sales, over 50,000 concurrent players on PS5 alone, and cross-play between 3 different platforms. I mean, look at these Steam charts. It's going insane. What is this peak? Let's delve into why Arma Reforger is blowing up right now. This was a kind of a stepping stone towards Arma 4, and Arma Reforger still is that, but with more updates, cross-play support, better improvement, and so much new content, community-made and first-party, it is no surprise to why this game has come so deeply into the limelight in the last few weeks. Look, it does have its issues, it's still got plenty of bugs, but what Arma game doesn't, and occasional crashes, but the positives are increasingly outweighing any of the negatives from before. Released on PC and Xbox in May of 2022, there was a lot of fanfare, but quickly faced backlash due to some bugs and performance problems. Not to mention the missing issues and a little bit of confusion. It kind of had a bit of an identity crisis, most players not understanding quite what this game was, because it's Arma, but it's not. We've waited so long since Arma 3 sort of blew the franchise up in a huge way to get the next installment, and everybody of course expected it to be Arma 4. So when Reforger came out, no one quite understood what was going on. So what did Bohemia Interactive describe it as? Well, experience an authentic Cold War combat and join the struggle for the sprawling mid-Atlantic islands of Everon and smaller offshore territory, Ireland, or take on a role of a game master. A lot of the point of it was to test out new features that would be coming in the next installment of the franchise, but more importantly, an introduction to consoles, which is why it released on Xbox in 2022. A new control system that was going to completely make it accessible to an entirely different audience. And that just now seems to be coming into fruition. Many dismissed it as just a tech demo because it felt sometimes unplayable. Yet fast forward to this point in time, Bohemia Interactive have delivered impressive patches, updates, and quality of life improvements. The game is so much more stable and visually refined, not to mention content rich. So, PlayStation 5 launch and crossplay. This is really why it's blowing up at this point in time. Bringing Arma Reforger to Sony's console introduced it to a massive new audience. With that, being crossplay with Xbox and PC has dramatically boosted player counts and server population. And for a mostly multiplayer title, that is kind of one of the most important parts, having full servers. Console players once starved of a true milsim experience can now access that Arma vibe. I mean, there isn't really anything like this on consoles. Sure, on PCs we've had games like this, not to mention Arma 1, Arma 2, well, it wasn't Arma 1, but you know what I mean. And having Arma 3 really bring it to a larger scale, then having games like Squad and Insurgency that had the faster paced stuff, Hell Let Loose, Postscriptum or Squad 44 that gave the World War II spin on this more hardcore shooter. There was never any of this for consoles, hence why they got the maybe unfairly impression of console players just liking your Call of Duty fast-paced run and gun shooters. It seems that there has been an audience for this slower milsim experience, they just didn't have the chance to get their hands on a game like this. The devs have been pushing meaningful updates as well. Much better UI, better performance, AI command systems as well, and new encumbrance mechanics. This game is not just about shooting with authentic weaponry or driving vehicles or riding in the back of player-driven helicopters. It's about capturing islands and communicating, setting objectives, having players working together, whether they are transporters or commanders, whether they're grunts on the ground, medics or officers. This is what this title is on a large scale, and it seems that the console players have taken to it like, well, me and Jaffa Cakes, which, I'm going to be honest, it's 11 a.m. in the morning and I've eaten 2 boxes of Jaffa Cakes. How am I not morbidly obese? The mod scene is also growing though. Arma Reforger's modding tools and workshop integration have led to massive expansions. Of course, different weapons, new vehicles, but the servers are really the big part. Roleplay servers. Remember Arma 4 or Arma 3 Life? That is now coming to the game. Or even Wasteland, which is kind of the juxtaposition to DayZ, having a similar experience of this post-apocalyptic world, but instead of zombies, it was really other players that were your main threats, building bases and being in factions. And now Wasteland has come to Arma Reforger. I cannot wait for the possibilities. Are we going to see another DayZ? I think that's a very viable question. I mean, Arma 2 was a spawn point of perhaps the biggest survival game of all time, spawning off a new genre that is hundreds of millions of dollars. Maybe with Reforger going the way it's going, we could see something similar. Historically, Arma games have always had a bit of a steep learning curve. Reforger, while still a milsim, is trying to be a bit more of that user-friendly and approachable experience because they want a new, well, audience. Of course, the old and hardcore people can still get exactly what they want. This big sort of open world and incredibly authentic military experience, but because of the smaller scale of Arma Reforger, and by the way, as a side note, when I say smaller scale, I mean bigger than pretty much any other game you play, but for Arma it's smaller scale. And of course, the more intuitive commands in terms of playing on controllers, being able to just interact with vehicles and actually using physical buttons rather than a hotkey for every different tiny little thing, makes it so much more approachable for everybody. Yet it still retains Arma's hallmark depth. Big maps, realistic ballistics, strategy, squad coordination, so on and so forth. I remember so many long nights of playing Arma 2, specifically Operation Arrowhead, trying to capture all of the deserts and the certain points, having helicopter pilots drop you off at LZs, getting out with your squad and communicating with them to take over towns. Once you accomplish such, you put down smoke and then a player-piloted helicopter will come and pick you up, take you back to base to resupply, or hop straight onto the next objective. And now this is coming back to Arma Reforger. I couldn't be happier. It is so satisfying and it gives me so much nostalgia whilst bringing it into a new, fresh, modern-day experience, and it does feel like a 2025 game now. The setting is a little bit different. Of course, we're playing in the Cold War, which goes all the way back to the early Armas, which I do really like as I was too young to experience it at the time, so now I get that fresh look on how this franchise started off. But let's talk a little bit about the game modes. There's Conflict, which is kind of the flagship mode, two teams capturing objectives, culminating in large-scale battles. The sense of anticipation before you meet an enemy is a really big highlight. Being able to see the objectives, heading towards them, and then all of a sudden the crack of a rifle out the distance, and hitting the deck or finding cover as fast as possible, and then the comms start lighting up, bringing in support and allies to try and help the cause. You also have Game Master, which is kind of a real-time sandbox for scenario creation. If anybody's played Arma 3, they'll be very familiar with this. But if anyone's new, basically you or somebody else can drop in AI units, objectives, vehicles, or even events on the fly whilst people are playing them. So you could have real players playing a certain objective, like capturing a town, and you as sort of the Game Master or Overlord God can drop in more enemies as you see fit, making it easier or harder depending on how you want to play it. There's a few more things like the upcoming Elimination, of course, which will be the first single-player scenario outside the tutorial, which would be great. And of course, things like Capture and Hold and Combat Ops. But all of these kind of are surrounding the core gameplay of large-scale military simulator warfare. The Infusion engine, which is the first test of Reforger, allows for really nice lighting and dynamic shadows. It brings in improved animations and a lot more stable multiplayer, which has plagued the Arma franchise for years and years and years. Sure, it was fun trying to hit an enemy across the distance using your really realistic FAL, but they'd probably rubber band and spring into a wall because, well, the netcode just was pretty rubbish in Arma 3. But now it's really improved, so it really does feel like PvP and combat scenarios are very possible within Reforger. Yet, I think me and a lot of people still like playing co-op, coordinating with real players against ally objectives. That just feels like the most fun and realistic way to play a game. So, should you buy it? Because I don't think it's for everybody. I think it's really for milsim enthusiasts that want a more accessible Arma experience. Maybe something that's not quite as hardcore as an Arma 3, but it is still a light years away from a battlefield of a Call of Duty. Players that want a slower, more strategic shooter will enjoy this. And even if you've never tried it before, I think Arma Reforger, whilst may not be the best point to jump into, is definitely an option. There's a lot of potential with the sandbox, so if you love messing around with creating custom scenarios or exploring modded content, Reforger is an absolute goldmine. And the devs' ongoing improvements hint at even more stuff and refinements coming down the road. All of this, though, is coming and leading into the culmination that will be Arma 4. I really think that maybe even now the success of Reforger might have pushed Arma 4 a little bit further down the line. Or when I say that, given the developers a bit more breathing room to be able to actually make the next mainline Arma experience something that everybody can enjoy. but I think jumping into it now is still probably a good idea. If you like what you've seen on screen, and if shooters are your thing, but you want a bit of a fresh take on them, you can't really go too far wrong with Reforger at the moment. It isn't perfect, but it is one of the most interesting tactical shooters. So if you're bored of the same old run and gun FPS over and over again, where it's all about quick dopamine hits rather than long strategic advancements, well, Arma Reforger is kind of your bet. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really want to enhance and introduce more games like Arma to this channel, so if you want to support, please subscribe. I'm still trying to get this channel up and running to a good place at where I think it should belong, but please give me some feedback down in the comments below. But until then, I will see you in the next one.